So let's look at doing 2 Image HDR in Lightroom. This is actually quite simple. What I'm going to do is select both of these images. Then we can go to the photo menu and choose Photo Merge HDR. Or I can just right click on the image and go to Photo Merge and HDR. And both of them will produce this as this dialog. What we've got is we've got auto align switched on. I would always have auto align switched on even if I'm on a tripod, because you never know if the tripod gets nudged or not, particularly if there are other people around. I'm going to choose auto settings, which will auto tone the resulting photograph. Then we have some deghost settings, which we'll talk about, and then create stack. Create stack is just going to group the images that I've used for the HDR image or the panorama image together into one group. The deghosting is used to hide where there is movement between the two images. In this case, obviously the water is moving, and so it's showing in these red areas where Lightroom has detected a small amount of movement in the photograph, which is a small amount because I've set low. If we choose medium, those areas will get bigger, and if we choose high, it gets far more fussy over where there's movement. I tend to go with low. Low is going to be fine. And then I click on merge. This will produce a DNG file, which is a raw image, an Adobe raw image, based around the two images that I've selected. And this is that image. And it's done a pretty good job. You know, there's a little bit of chromatic aberration up there that we can easily fix that. Or is there? Actually, maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just the preview. And that's done a pretty good job. And that, for Lightroom, is all there is to it. We go back to my library module and we choose search again, and we'll just expand up this group. So what the grouping does is it takes the HDR image and it puts the other two photos as part of that group, so I can collapse that, which just basically gives me more space in this grid view dialog. To combine these two images in Photoshop, all I would do is I would process this photo for the shadow areas. So we might open up the shadows a little bit. We'll maybe just open up the blacks, do texture, maybe a little bit of sharpening. I'm not going to do that in here, but we could do. And in this photo, we're going to adjust purely for the sky. So what I've done is, just pull down the highlights a touch and the whites. And then we select both of these two images. So one that's processed for the water and the shadows, and the other one that's processed for the sky. And we'll choose Edit in, Open as Layers in Photoshop. And what we're going to do in this, we're going to do some luminosity masking. Now, Ralph introduced luminosity masks to us last year, and I've got some actions which will help you create those masks in both Photoshop and Photoshop Elements. But they're a separate set of actions that you'll need to use, because what I'm going to show you now you can only do in Photoshop. You cannot do what I'm about to show you in Photoshop Elements. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull the lighter image down below. This is going to be my base image. And let's think about what we need to do here. What we need to do on this base image is filter out the sky, and we're going to need to pull it in from the darker image. So let me create my masks. So I select my create all action in my luminosity masks, and I just click on the execute button. and this goes off and creates a whole load of masks, and we can see those in the Channels tab. If you can't see channels, go to Window and just choose Channels up there. And we've got 6 masks created around to select the brightest areas of the photo, and it's getting progressively more and more selective over what it chooses. Then we have 6 masks which will select the darkest parts of the image, and then we have 6 masks that will select all the midtones. Now for this photo, I think something like Brights 3 gives me quite a contrasty mask, which is what we want. Remember, areas which are black are going to be in the mask, would obscure those same areas in the actual layer that we're going to apply the mask to, and the areas that are white will let those areas of that layer shine through. So you hold down the Control key on the PC or the Command key on the Mac, and we click on Brights 3, and that makes a selection. We can see the marching ants around there. Next thing we need to do is click on RGB, then we go back to layers. I activate my bright layer and make sure it's selected, and we can see the parts of the image that are going to be allowed to come through. Click on the Add Mask icon, and it's allowed those areas to come through. So we've now got the sky looking pretty good, but if we look down at the water, it's clearly not made a good selection of the water. So make sure the mask is selected, and we're going to use a brush and black. So the reason why it's not made such a good job on the water is because on the mask, one thing on the mask, if we go down to the brights here, we can see that the water is white. That means it's going to be selected. But we select the mask, and we'll choose a black brush because we're going to paint out these areas, and then we're just going to paint those areas out to get that water detail back. Just make sure you don't go up into the sky. And there we go. And there's HDR done from 2 images inside Photoshop.